Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Call the meeting to order. The Village of Seymour respectfully acknowledges that we are on the land gathered here on the unceded territories of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. Introduction of late items. None. Approval of agenda. Everybody's good with it? Excellent. Minutes of previous meeting, the recommended resolution that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on December 6, 2022 be adopted, and that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on December 13th, 2022 be adopted. Motion, please.
I'll move that.
Second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. No petitioning delegations. Correspondence. Move that correspondence A and B be received. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, discussion. Anybody have anyone they want pulled out of the A and B? No? Oh, Councillor Paulson? Sorry, your microphone, please.
The North Island Timber Supply Review. And there's a meeting coming up in February. I wonder if we want to send a rep to that because we are a forest-based.
Our rep would be Scott, I believe, or Councillor Burchett. Right, Councillor Burchett. Go ahead after Councillor Paulson turns off her mic there. Thank you.
I'd be happy to go.
Okay, so we have, we'll have to make a separate resolution on that right after we finish from this. Okay, so B has been pulled. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. And a recommended resolution that we send Councillor Burchett to the meeting in February for the North Island Timber Supply Review and discussion. Have a motion, please.
I'll move that.
Second.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Carried. Number 7, council reports. Drainage issue on McMillan. Councillor Tinsley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The CAO has kindly included the emails that we exchanged back and forth. It was basically about, I had talked to a few of the residents about the latest water issue that occurred when there was heavy melting and the water levels. And I had a few ideas in there. The CAO has answered most of my questions, but I think there's one for consideration, which is around is there, well, from a basic point of view, is there a way for us to, as we work on that from a major project point of view, help the residents there that are most affected, either by supplying more sandbags or having them set up, possibly even during that season, having that road so that it's basically shut off, so to speak. You can go from either end and the sandbags are in place. One of the residents did have he cited about 6 inches of water in his garage at one place and was sandbagging at about 4 a.m. in the morning. So anyway, those are just ideas to the communication. That's my report on that.
Okay, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, the ideas expressed, thank you, in the email exchange. One was just to ensure that we potentially, if it's possible, ensure that there's even more sandbags available than normally we place there seasonally. So that for one of the residents did receive extra sandbags a little bit later, but could have used them right from the beginning. So that there's, if we're just stacking like we are, which is great, that the residents have more than enough to deal with the water issues that are occurring and becoming more common seasonally. And then, so that's definitely, I think that's achievable because I believe we have the sandbags. And then the other option is to, as opposed to those residents having to sort of judge what's going on and rush out in the middle of the night to sandbag their house. The other concept is, I've actually looked at it because I walk right by there lots of times, is to do an S of sandbags in the middle of the street, which then allows residents to go that way when they want to go out and, this way on this side, that type of thing. And then it's permanently there. So the residents aren't permanently there just during that season. So that's the other concept.
Can the sandbags be put on the same side of the street where the water's coming from?
Good question. Unfortunately not, because the water, the water comes from, I'll use the term the north side, I believe, and then it's going to cross the street. So it's either going to go at an angle or straight, or so it's not a question of just putting them on one side. Eventually it's got to go across the street. So.
And it couldn't be sandbagged down further, like start here to there to where the water is bypassing those homes?
I see what you mean. So one of the issues that I considered is there's two driveways there that are the most affected. There's actually 3 homes that are most affected, but in this case, it appeared to be just the 2. One of the things is that when you block off that side of the street, or either side, if you were to go with your concept there, it blocks off the driveways. So there's no access in and out. The people have to take the sandbags down to
On
get
the
out.
opposite side?
Yeah, on both sides. Yeah. Whether you do it on this side, the north side, or
Okay.
the south side, if those are the right directions. Yeah. So the concept was, if you do an S, you have a lane out of these driveways, and you have a lane out of these driveways. And it's just that traffic can't go straight back. They have to go, around the circle or whatever. Anyway, that's just a concept. So those are the 2 major things or ideas that I would consider could help us mitigate the concern that those residents have had, and to allow them to not have to deal with that situation on their own, so to speak, in the middle of the night,
Okay.
until we are able to continue down our progress of major changes, right?
CAO, can we leave that to you to discuss with Public Works to see what can be done there in terms of extra sandbagging or the S that Councillor Tinsley is bringing forth?
Yeah, we'll have a look at that. The S part, I'm told that those sandbags don't last a long time. They just don't have a great shelf life. So if we're doing S's, it seems to me like it would be subject to traffic wear and tear. Am I wrong?
Thank you. So the concept there would be the sandbags would be sitting there. Nobody would be driving over them, if that's what you mean. They would come down. They wouldn't be able to go straight through that seat like it's a circle, right? So the residents here would always have to leave and come from this side. The residents from the other side would have to leave and come from the other side. There'd be no driving over sandbags. The driveways would be clear. The water would be reconnected. There'd be no driving over them.
Okay. You can assume that all the residents, whether or not they're on McMillan or not, would know that and not drive over them. So that's one little issue. But we can look at that. Second, I've had a chat with Tony, and he usually places 4 pallets worth of sandbags. He's agreed to increase that to 6. So they'll be placed strategically up there to catch that occurrence. So that part we can certainly deal with. And I'll have a chat with Tony about the concept. But I have a sneaking feeling traffic is going to be an issue because, again, I guess they're just not built that well, the sandbags, and they're not really good at getting run over.
Councillor Tinsley?
Thank you. Yeah, the concept would be that the road would have temporary signage indicating that it's closed or it's dead end or whatever the term would be, so that traffic on both ends would know they cannot go through all the way. And that would be the temporary kind of road work kind of signs that would sit there and say, you can't go through here. Anyway, that's the idea. Thanks.
Okay, so staff will get back to Councillor Pulse.
I just, I know we have low capacity for filling sandbags and placing I know the ones that are placed there are easy access, but I hear, correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear you suggesting that staff should be called out at 4 in the morning or whenever this is happening. Because I know previously other members of council have been called out at early hours of the morning to come and fix it. And it's just impossible to fix. I think setting out the sandbags when we know that a rainstorm or a melt or something is coming would be more proactive and have that set up, even if it's set up for 6 months or however long the rainy period is. But
Yeah, I don't think anybody's suggesting that they come out at 4. I think Councillor Tinsley's plan is put it in place so it is there, so nobody has to do the 4 in the morning, including the residents. Okay, so we'll leave that with the CAO to bring, and we can bring that back to the next meeting. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Tinsley, do you have? Oh, Councillor Burchett.
Councillor Boucher.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of water, I'd like to reschedule the tour to the our water filtration. And if we could include Tony showing us some of the key points of the drainage issues with the culverts and that, so we're familiar with that, and we can maybe put some more eyes on it and get some more ideas. And just further to the sandbagging, my only concern is if the McMillan does get blocked off or is not allowed traffic through, is that okay with the fire department and their policy for being able to turn around the fire trucks if there's an emergency? So just might want to check with the fire department on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the council report.
Can I just make a?
CAO?
And I'm sorry, I just want to emphasize that, of course, when a water event happens, snow, water, whatever, staff are usually on it pretty quickly. The issue then becomes one of what's the priority. And when there's a water event, there's usually something going on with the water treatment plant, and that is usually their first priority, to make sure that the village has water, because we have had events lately. And you're going to see this during your budget discussions where the screens have plugged and no water was getting through at all from the stream. So when that happens, obviously that's where they're going to spend their time. Not to say they won't do it here, because I know when that particular event was, Mike was called out and they were filling sandbags, I think shortly after 7 o'clock in the morning, getting some more sandbags up there. But part of that issue is making sure there's 2 more pallets up there, and we'll make sure that's done.
Yeah, I think if there's the proactive thing that Councillor Tinsley and Councillor Polson were talking about, and we know a rain event is coming and it's done prior to, then that won't pull them away from any priority at that point. Is that all you have? Oh, sorry, CAO?
If we know something's going to happen, absolutely we should react to it. Unfortunately, the last 2 events that I know of, the rain was fine over in Newcastle Creek, but in back of McMillan, it was huge. So it's that kind of a micro blast that you get from time to time that you really can't judge. But having said that, if we know something's big happening, certainly we should be aware of it and preparing better.
Councillor Tinsley?
I fully agree with all these comments. I think we realize that it's unpredictable, but in many ways it is predictable. It happens at least once a year and will continue to happen until we get our major fix in place. And in speaking with some of the residents, some who've been there over 10 years, they've been dealing with it almost annually for that period of time. So I'd really like to see all these ideas that we're talking about potentially come to fruition to make it a little more manageable for them till we get there.
Okay, CAO?
I'll make one final comment, and it's on bullet 4, where you talked about engaging forestry, and I said in my email that we've had 2 emails back and forth with the gentleman from Mosaic. I think we definitely have to engage them, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be here so I can say this. I think we should be energetic and going after them, because the issues are not Village of Sayward issues derived. They come from up that mountain, and the problem is forestry. And that's great that they're doing that, but they should also be held accountable and help the village solve the problem. So that's my two.
Agreed. Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you. Just one more point, and thank you, CAO, for bringing up that last very important point, which I forgot. I totally agree. I believe that we should be regularly writing to the current rights holders there, the forestry company, as well as the Ministry of Forestry, and that those don't get me wrong, I love forestry. Forestry is a great thing. It's just we have to hold them responsible for their accountability for the land management above us. And I would even go so far to suggest that through the Ministry of Forestry, there should be no rights to cut above a village like this. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But that's another avenue of letter writing. But I believe it's just going back to history. I mean, things were done historically that didn't make a lot of sense, and I think they have to be held accountable for it as we move forward. And I believe that continued letter writing would be something that the village should pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO, you're.
I think I'm going to leave the first part. We've got the contact made with Mosaic, so I'll wait to get back in touch with them. It just the holiday things skewed it, but I just want to put the thought in your head that I'm okay with forestry too, as long as it's done properly, which means to me that the ditches up there and the culverts are maintained every year, and if they're maintained properly and the drainage from that area into the village is proper, we won't have this problem. So it's not that they can't cut, they just have to do it right.
Do we need a resolution to receive? No? Okay, thank you. Reports on committees. Committee of the whole meeting, December 13th, 2022. A, Sayward Futures, CAO. Any comments? No? Okay, it's a recommended resolution that council endorses recommendation C 2212 made by the committee of the whole, and that the items requested for the light up parade on December 16th be provided. Why is, sorry, I'm a little lost. To be provided Sayward Futures at no cost. Did we not do that at the prior meeting? Okay, thank you for the clarification. Now we are making it official. So let's do an official vote. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Council dress code, that council endorse recommendations C 2215 and C 2216 made by the committee of the whole, and that a dress code be added to the dress code conduct bylaw, and that the topic of jeans in the dress code be discussed by council today at the regular meeting. So I have a motion, please.
I'll move that.
Second. Discussion. Councillor Paulson.
I thought I read somewhere that we were going to discuss having endorsing a dress code. I'm not sure where I read that.
We are discussing and we're endorsing the dress code that was brought to the COW. At that time, we're not discussing, the jeans was something that we were going back and forth on at the time, but the dress code itself, we were discussing. And at that point, there was 4 of us around the table that voted in favor of a dress code and 1 against. A dress code, period.
That was at the
At the COW.
cow.
Correct. So now we finalize whatever. So the topic of jeans under unfinished business. Okay. So what are the 3? That was discussion. So do we have all in favor? Opposed? 3 of you are opposed to a dress code? Okay. Motion's defeated. And code of conduct. The council endorsed recommendation C 2219 made by the committee of the whole, and that section 82-2 of the code of conduct bylaw be reviewed for legal counsel. Do I have a motion, please?
Yeah.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? Councillor Bichette?
Yeah, and maybe just some of the wording in that to relate to if it's medical, it shouldn't be an issue. If it's non-medical drugs, cannabis, whatever, alcohol, then obviously that should be against the code of conduct. And there's a recommendation for, legal advice on that. But if we change the wording to non-medical, I don't think we'll have an issue legally.
The only thing I question is if I've had people come to me saying that they use gummy bears or smoke marijuana on a regular basis because of medical. They're medical glaucoma or night blindness, or they have a limp. So are we requesting that they prove that they show medical, like a doctor's note? How do you determine medical? Go ahead, Councillor Bichette.
I'm just saying that we should, in the wording, say non-medical. That's all I'm suggesting. If it is an issue, then obviously maybe take it further. But if we don't have an issue with it, then it's a non-issue. I'm just saying the wording of your code of conduct that you want in the bylaw. That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay, should we wait till we get a word back from legal in terms of the proper wording? Okay. Councillor Bichette?
I mean, there are federal law supersedes provincial law, which supersedes municipal law. So you kind of have to fall back on the federal government's policy on that for jobs, for employment as a standard. So that's just my suggestion.
What is your suggestion? That we take something from the federal law and implement it into the bylaw?
Know that our bylaw tries to not supersede federal law.
No, agreed. And I'm sure that legal would spell that out for us pretty quick. So why don't we wait till we get word back from legal on exactly how to word that? So we're covered all the way around. Agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Oh, just in case I missed something. Recommended resolution that council endorse recommendation C 22-21 made by the committee of the whole, that the purchase of gifts proceeds for the individual listed in the staff report. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. You didn't vote on C.
We didn't vote on C?
No.
Sorry, all in favor of C. Opposed? Okay,
And if I may,
carried.
sorry, it's a little bit picky. The first half of D is fine. The second half has a conflict in it. I believe from the meeting that it was held. Councilor Wilson.
Yeah, the conflict has to be recognized by the person with who's in conflict, correct? And then they have to, it's the person who may be in conflict of interest has to actually be the one to state that they're in conflict of interest and then excuse themselves.
Yes, and this one's a little tough because you don't see the report in front of you. And so that's
Okay,
my,
fair enough. Okay,
but the
So-
resolution should be split in two with
very well.
Councilor Paulson given the option to.
So we will split that in two. So the first part of the recommendation is that council endorse the recommendation C 22-21 made by the committee of the whole. Do I have a motion on that, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. And number 2, that the purchase of gifts provided for the individuals listed in the staff report. You need to first declare a conflict of interest and then go. Yeah. Sorry, can you hit your,
It's a financial conflict. I need to leave.
thank you. And is that for E as well? Councillor Polson? Thank you. Okay, recommended resolution that council endorse the recommendation. Pardon me, for the gifts. We're doing that one right now. Listed in the staff report. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
Second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. E, the memorial plaque for former Mayor John McDonald. That the council endorse the recommendation C-2222 made by the committee of the whole, and that the budget for the plaque be set at $2,500 maximum. And that this item be included in the 2023 financial plan. Do I have a motion, please? Someone.
I'll move that.
Second,
I will second that.
discussion. CAO.
Just so you know, I sent the particulars off to the signing people today, so we should get an answer back within the week on cost and layout.
Thank you. All in, Councillor Gilkin, go ahead. Gilkin, go ahead. Gilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where, I just want to ask a question. Where is the plaque going? Or has that been decided yet?
Yes. Yeah, council decided it's going to be at the gazebo. Yes. You're welcome.
I'll go back.
No, it's hard to remember everything that happens at a meeting. It's okay. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. We can go.
I'll be stuck in -30 weather really bad. That's everything up. I don't know how we can deal with it. There's so wait, I mean, there's Elsie on the streets, there's car here.
I see more copies, you can still see the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Okay. Mayor's report, none. I miss F? Oh, sorry. I did. F, community reports. Recommended resolution that council endorse recommendation C-2223 made by the committee of the whole, and that the report be added to the strategic planning session to be held in the spring of 2023. Do you have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Okay, mayor's report, none. Unfinished business. Discussion from December 13th, committee of the whole, meeting on whether to allow jeans in the dress code. That's a moot point because it's been defeated to no dress code. Staff reports. It's inappropriate to comment on that now, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I'll save it. Staff reports, relationship building session. To the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pretty straightforward. Just, I think I've sent off, well, I know I sent off an email with all the details and all the homework that you have to do prior to the first event. Laid it out here, what's happening, and staff are working on it. So other than that, if you've got any further direction.
So council's aware that all staff are coming. So it'll be, we're not sure about Melissa at this point, CAO.
Melissa said yes. Michelle has said her husband's out of town. So she has, maybe, I shouldn't get into it, but she has some personal issues that she has to deal with. I'm still kind of waiting to hear from Tony.
Tony?
Yep.
Okay. So that was the motion, please. Can I have a motion, please? That council received the relationship building session 2023 preparation report.
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Carried. OCP review issues is scheduled for final approval process 2023. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought it would be good just to summarize some of the discussion to date, as well as ask council for direction, especially on the bullet items 1 and 2. I think 3 and 4 can wait later as the whole process evolves. So what we're really looking for is you're okay with the date, February date for first reading. And then the second one is to talk about how you wish to proceed on the First Nations issue. So with that, the rest is, unless you've got any other questions, but those first 2 bullets are the things that we're looking for direction on.
Okay, so let's start number 1. Council to consider the approval of the OCP draft first reading of the bylaw. Staff will then ensure that the OCP is sent to the affected agency and organizations. Does council approve the February date? So do I have a motion to go ahead with the February date for the OCP? Sorry, somebody's mic is on. CAO? Thank you.
I'll move that for the February 21st date.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Being none, carried. Number 2 is that council provide direction on the consultation with First Nations and the village residents. Direction is needed now. When you're referring to provide direction on the consultation, we discussed the $2,000 if that comes into play when the new council comes into play for KFN. Is that correct? Oh,
Sorry, that's in that part, and council did make a decision on it.
okay.
So when you go in camera, if you want to talk about that, then we can talk about it.
So what direction are you looking for?
So I appreciate that you've already discussed a lot of this in camera, and rather than bringing the whole thing out, I thought it would be simpler just to bring out the 2 main issues, which is the first reading, as well as basically for you to make public the decision on how you engage with First Nations. Now, if you want me to remind you, I can do that.
When we go into camera?
I can do that now. Well,
Well, we didn't rise and report.
did not
No.
rise and report on it. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to wait to the in camera. So number 2 should be moved to the in camera. Is that correct?
Well, I think you've got to bring it out of in camera because you're asking us to start moving on this process and it has to be done in open.
Right, but we can only do that if we rise and report, right?
In my mind, and I'm sorry, I should have prepped you all a little bit more than what I did, is that you've made the decision in camera. If you remember, you opted for option 3.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, and you can correct me on this, I gotta go back in my memory, which is basically a letter be sent after first reading.
But we're, sorry to interrupt, but we're discussing about in camera without the rise and report. So we should hold that off until the in camera session. Should we not? Typically, legally?
Well, the corporate officer is probably gonna jump on me for this. I thought bringing it forward as like a new issue here now this is your opportunity to talk about it. So you're not talking about what happened in camera. In a way you are, but in a way you aren't. You're making it all new and fresh.
Yeah,
But if you want to simply go back and bring that portion out of in camera, that's another way of doing it.
okay. I think from the expression I'm getting from the CO is that we move it to the in-camera. I know. I have a direct line of sight. So we're going to take two and not discuss that at all until we go to in-camera. Okay, and then we'll rise and report on that. Okay, everybody? Thank you. Okay, so we're on B, correct? Correct, CO?
Yes, you're still on B. Yep, I think you've done B, right? That's complete now?
Okay, we voted. All good? Okay, then we'll move to C. Opportunity for UBCM Fire Smart Community Funding Support. CAO, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I've got to add is I think we've got a wonderful coordinator at the SRD that goes out and finds all these things and basically does all the preparation for it. And I embarrassingly put my name on it because he did all the work as well as the fire chief, but kudos to them.
Okay, perfect. So that the recommended resolution is that the report from Chief Administrative Officer be received and that the part of the Village of Sayward ongoing work in relation to wildfire risk reduction and application for financial assistance under the Community Resilience Investment 2023 Fire Smart Community and Funding Support Grant be authorized for submission to the UBCM, and that the Village of Sayward agrees to commit to the overall grant management if the application is successful. Do I have a motion, please? Second? Sorry, do I have a motion?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? Counselor Paulson,
Is there an opportunity here to?
your microphone, please.
Is there an opportunity here to add in a commitment from the forestry department for cleaning up their
Stumpage.
mess along the Sayward Road where the trees were blown down in 2018? And if you look at all of that dead and dried debris that's there now, and also between Sayward Road and the logging road, if that was to catch on fire, we'd be stuck. We'd be swimming out of here because there's no other way to get out.
Yeah, we've been, that was something that the former CAO took on as well. And apparently a lot of that land where the deadfall is, was Nature's Trust land as well. So we've had a lot of difficulty getting any movement on that. I believe staff should have a report on that or some kind of documentation on that, on what was done in the past, where they were calling, who they were looking at. Okay, so we can bring that to the next meeting on that if we can find anything. But Nature's Trust was an issue.
So but I'm wondering whether that issue can be brought forward to the to Sean
I'm sure it could be.
to include in this resiliency funding support.
In staff, make sure that that Mr. Koopman is made aware. CAO,
Resolution, basically asking Sean to consider this as part of that funding process.
okay, so we'll do a recommended resolution that Mr. Koopman from the SRD be informed and make the deadfall from the storm from 2018 a priority on this project. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Okay. And that the report from the chief administrative officer be received and that part of the village of the ongoing work in relationship to, did we just do that? I already did all that. Did we vote on it yet? Okay, let's do that. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Council remuneration option return item, CAO.
Was asked to bring this back with option D to include stipends for regular and committee of the whole council meetings. It wasn't included in the original report. So I made that crunch of numbers, and I guess my comment is if the goal is to encourage attending meetings, then the committee of the whole and regular council meetings are the most numerous. And of course, they're all important, right? They're all important. That would be considered as also being paid. And the number crunching I did, you can see, excuse me, you can see on page 2 of the report what it would mean in terms of the individual payments, but also in the total budget. It really doesn't make a big change in the bottom line. And of course, all this is depend on, these are averages. So if you have a year that you're going to have more council meetings or more committee of the whole meetings, then obviously these numbers will go up. But for the purposes of this report, the only thing I could use was the averages.
We voted last time. So if we just add what you have highlighted in terms of what council would get paid for a stipend for the cows, we can add that to what's already existing, correct?
I think your resolution should be that staff be directed to amend the remuneration bylaw to reflect option D on the report.
Okay,
I'm sorry, C, you're right, sorry. No, D,
option C,
did I goof it right?
C or D?
Okay, well, D is the highlighted one,
No,
and my apologies. Okay. Let's take a step back. If your option is to encourage all meetings, which would include special meetings, then option C is the way to go. But if you only want committee of the whole, then it's option B. Okay, I'm sorry.
but option D brings the stipend down or the per meeting down to 270 for each regular and council meeting, cow.
Okay, can I do that again?
Please.
If the goal is that you want to encourage attendance at all meetings, then all meetings should be paid for.
But it doesn't have to be the same amount as a regular
No,
council
it would
meeting.
have to change to reflect the averages. So option C pays for regular, special, and council meetings. The per meeting fee would be $220. If you only wanted to pay for council and cow, then the per meeting cost is $270.
Okay, could we not leave the pay as we've already decided and add cows for an additional, like say $60 or $80 per meeting, opposed to 200 and something? Could we not do that and have that amendment?
I'd have to recrunch the numbers because the way I did it was so that your budget would remain roughly the same. And if I changed the cows to a different amount, if you're saying leave it at 270 for regular meetings and cows are less, I'd have to rework those numbers because there's fewer cows than there are regular meetings.
Right. This suggestion I think I made last time was to have like the cows at $60 to $80 a meeting, not the same as we're charging or as we're paid for a regular council meeting. And that Councillor Tinsley? CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From my perspective, the meetings that we know are going to happen are the council and the COW meetings. So I think it's simplest to just have it for those, and then special meetings are unusual, something we can't control. By focusing on just the meetings that we can control, we know they're scheduled in, we're safe within our budget. Everyone's expected to attend meetings regardless.
Yeah, cows aren't dated though. There's
But-
no schedule for a cow.
But we do have more of a, a reasonable track record and so to speak going forward, as I understand it, I believe. Approximately, as opposed to a special, and more normally our special meetings are because of a crisis or because of
Right.
a lack of quorum. Just, that's my thoughts anyway. Thanks.
You've actually had more special meetings in the last 4 years than you have had cow meetings. Not by much. But you've had 2 more special meetings than you have of cow meetings. That's just a numerical comment only.
Councillor
I have
Pritchett.
just been proven,
Sorry,
I'm just going to admit I've been proven wrong. Thanks.
Councillor Pritchett.
I just like clarification on special meetings, what that constitutes.
CAO.
Well, special meetings are generally like a one topic kind of meeting. You want to address a particular issue and you want to have an in-depth discussion on it. They don't generally, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't generally last over a number of months. You meet, you discuss it and you move on.
Or there's items or deadline.
A deadline, like for example, if a grant comes up or something needs council approval immediately, and it's one item, it could be a 10-minute meeting on a special council, on a special meeting. Unless special meetings also though, could include something on something major has happened. There's a fire, for example, that is a threat to the village. And that obviously would not be a 5-minute conversation.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. I feel like all of the meetings, the special meetings, the council meetings and the CAL meetings are important. And if you're not getting reimbursed for a special meeting, then that's the incentive that people attend, right? That's what you want, is for people
Correct.
to attend. So you want to make sure that you have a quorum. And if special meetings aren't going to be reimbursed for, then that would drop our per diem to a lower level than what we were receiving before, unless the amount for the COW and regular meetings are individually were compensated for a higher rate. I know some of the council meetings have gone for 20 minutes or half an hour and they're over. So there's no justification for saying that a special meeting should be paid less because it could, if it's a crisis and emergency, then you need to have everyone here. And I feel that the reimbursement should be the same for any meeting. Any meeting that we attend should be considered essential. So I would certainly support option C.
So that would drop our current rate down from 300, is it? 340 to 220. Councillor Tinsley.
I would agree with option C. And the recommendation of staff and Councillor Paulson. I think what we can do to manage the budget, because budgets are a concern in our village, as we know, is just ensure that there's whatever is the amount of the budget, it's paid out per option C. But if the budget is hit before the end of the year, then there's no more payments after that. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if you could go no more payments after that. If we agree to this in the bylaw, then regardless if we're over budget or not. So perhaps when we go into the financial plan, we make sure that we build a little cushion just in case. Right, opposed to saying, I'm sorry, at this date, you're no longer getting paid to go to the meetings, which would somewhat, yeah, it would so much defeat the purpose of. So let's be clear on what this means. So we're talking about all council get $220 for each regular, special, and Cal meeting. Stipend M is 12 meetings for 300 at 330 at 3,600. Stipend C is 12 meetings, 4 at 100 for 4,800. Correct? Meetings 29, 5, 220, 39.9. So it actually decrease in budget. So we get decrease of what you normally would get paid. Is that not correct? Right. Or you may not. So basically your per meeting will be cut.
Sorry, just to add to that, sorry. When I did the calculations, if you look at the top of page 2, I added 5% into what the budget was this year to add a little bit of cushion for this kind of thing. So if the budget for 2023 was 40,300, that's a little bit more than, you know, what we've had in past. So there's a little bit of cushion built in there.
So there's $2,000 cushion at 5% is what you're saying. Councillor Paulson, what do you think?
My opinion is that we should be reimbursed for every meeting that we attend in the special, regular, and Cal meetings, plus the $100 a month stipend. So, and we have the, oh, just to clarify, when we are excused from a meeting, we're not paid for that meeting, even if we're off sick or no, so you're not paid for
If it's an unexcused absence, you're not paid.
unexcused absent.
That's correct.
Okay.
A non-excused absence, you would not get paid. And that would have to extend into special meetings and into cows as well. Councillor Golkin, what do you think? Gilkin? Gilkin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in agreement with option C. I wanted to clarify, I know it's kind of backtracking, but you said 60 or 70 to $80 on top of what were you talking about before? I just wanted to.
Yeah, no,
dig-
my
I-
suggestion.
I don't know anything, right? So I'm trying to.
No, that's fine. My suggestion was we keep what we're getting paid now. And for every special meeting or cow,
Right.
we get either $60 or $80 and not the same amount.
Okay.
That was the
okay.
suggestion
I
that
thought, I thought you meant on top. No,
Not
that
on
makes-
top.
That makes sense. Okay,
No.
perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Burchett. Thoughts?
I agree with Councillor Paulson that all meetings should be paid, but I don't think that all meetings have the same value. So they should be strategically valued based on the importance. Regular meetings should be at the highest, cows should be less, and special meetings should be their own individual price. And however that relates to the budget, I mean, all the numbers are, pretty close. Obviously, I can only speak for myself. I'm not here for the money. So to me, it doesn't matter how it's split up as long as it's within budget. But I do agree that all meetings should be paid.
Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm for option C. And I think keeping it as option C and the numbers is just fine. It's simple to manage.
Okay, so recommended resolution is that option C include regular council meetings, special council meetings, and cows. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
Discussion? Counselor Bichette?
Yeah, I don't think we've hashed out this, you know, you had an idea how you wanted the meetings paid for. So is that another option versus just we all go with option C?
Well, no, it seemed to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of, just by reading the room and some of the comments, is my motion or my idea of getting paid $60 to $80 for a cow or a special meeting did not go over well.
Well, I was in agreement with some of that. I just, you know, have a different value for the meetings in my own mind.
Yeah, I think for staff expedience as well. I mean, I personally think we should keep and just do the cows or special meetings at $60 to $80. Currently, we're not getting paid for those to begin with. Until we increase the budget, I don't think council or mayor has had an increase in quite a few years. So until we go through the financial plan and increase that budget, we can revisit it at that time. But for me, I'm comfortable with keeping it the way it is and then adding $60 or $80 per person for the cows or special meeting.
And I'm in agreement with that.
CAECO? Okay, so we had a motion on the table. And that was to go with option C. So we had the discussion. So we have all in favor of option C. There we go. Opposed? Yeah, I know. Thank you. Okay. Opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, you need a motion on that? Can we have a motion for amendment on the bylaw, please?
I'll move for an amendment.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, revenue anticipation bylaw, that the staff be directed to prepare a revenue anticipation bylaw for January 17th, 2023 council meeting, and that the mayor and the corporate officer be authorized to sign the necessary form, procure the temporary loans with the municipal finance authority. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor? Opposed? Oh, how about discussion? Anybody want to talk about it? No? Okay. Carried. It didn't sound like anybody wanted to talk about it. So let's go past it. Discussion of the orientation binder. The council receive, discuss, and provide comments as necessary on the orientation binder. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple things. First off, I'm not going to get into it too deeply because I think your session at LGLA is going to be held by a bunch of people that are lawyers and immensely more qualified than I am, but I do want to hit a few of the high points along the way. So I'll go through specific things and tell me if I'm talking too much. So the very first thing is I should ask, the binder itself is always almost like a living document. If you find things you want to put in there, let us know and we'll put it in there. The first one is a respectful workplace policy. It's a great policy. It basically is a really important foundation about how we react with the public as well as amongst ourselves. Just to get into it a little bit, it's very important to pay attention to the definitions so everybody has an understanding of what these things mean. It's very important to understand that the giver of whatever the behavior is different than the receiver. And it's the receiver that this is really concerned about, because you may think that you're saying something or doing something that's okay, but that's not really your job. Your job, the job is the person receiving the comments. So it's important to understand that when you do say something, you got to know what the impact is on that person. Anyway, I'm through pages 3 and 4 talks about the types of behavior. I think that's pretty straightforward. Page 5 deals with the roles and responsibilities. Again, I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, council's expected proactively maintain a workplace free of discrimination and personal harassment. It sounds pretty straightforward, but you know, there's a reason why they print these things, right? Because I mean, there's so many materials over the last 10 years that have come out, and much of it is in response to councils running astray and staff running astray of what is good and decent behavior. Confidentiality. Everything that's made by way of a complaint is confidential. It doesn't go anywhere. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes it's not. You just simply can't talk about it except if you're involved in the actual incident or you're investigating the incident. The complaint handling part, there's a flow chart, Appendix A. It's really simple. Page 7 has the steps. You hope that you have relationships that you can actually, at stage 1, the people involved can have a face-to-face conversation. Unfortunately, too often it's in the heat of the moment, and it has to go to a different stage where you know the parties are separated and there's an investigation going on. And I've seen that several times, and it can get really hot and it can get very, very touchy. So it's important to know that sometimes, you know, you just can't just say, "Have you talked to Joe about it?" Nobody named Joe here, right? So yeah, it depends on the situation. There is a formal complaint process. The CAO handles all the complaints. And the mayor would have and acting mayor complaints involving the CAO, me. So basically I am and I think if there's something between council members, obviously that's something for you guys to decide how you're going to handle, but obviously the mayor would take an active role, unless of course you're the bad guy, and then you have to figure out who's going to handle it. There can be investigative processes where you hire someone to come in and actually investigate it. I mean, at that point, it's getting pretty serious. I don't suspect it'll happen, but you got to be aware of that. If it goes really south on you, you may have to do that. I would assume at that stage, your CAO is talking to you quite, informing you quite well of what's going on. A few other little things. There's an appeal process. You have to understand that part of this process may involve a criminal complaint, depending on how serious it is, and hopefully all this stuff sort of gets caught in step 1 and step 2, that you don't get into those things. But you know, I've seen where people have been physically handled, and that's very serious stuff. A lot of it is basically conflicts of personality and not seeing each other's position, but that's where your CAO comes in to help them through that process. So again, I've tried to keep it at a very high level. If there's any questions on that? No? Okay. You got all the forms there, and the flow chart process is flow chart on page 11 is really useful to see how that goes. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the code of conduct for the Village of Sherwood Council. Really important for you to know and understand, and I'm not going to get into it too much, just a few points. It's really important that the relationships are strong and built on a good foundation, and that you've taken some good steps to make that happen. Some basic understanding is the chair, the mayor is the spokesperson for the village on council matters, and decisions of council are communicated by the chair, the mayor. That's part 5, communications. The chief administrative officer is the spokesperson for village on administrative and operational matters. I shouldn't be involved in council politics or involved in council policy. That's up for you guys. If I get a question like that, I direct them at the mayor, and the mayor does likewise to me on operational details. It sounds sometimes a little bit officious, but there's reasons why these rules are put in place. So number 16 here says all corporate correspondence shall be sent on letterhead of the village and shall be used for the purposes of obtaining, giving council information, and conveying the official position of the village established by resolution of council. That's that last part. It's important because then everybody knows what's being done and said, and everybody's on the same page. It's sort of similar to when someone wants to go to a conference or someone wants to go to that forestry meeting, always get in the resolution. It's very clear. You guys know what's happening. You know who's going where. And I always like to throw in that insurance thing that if he's on or she's on official council business, then you're fully covered by our insurance policies. I'm not saying that they would necessarily not cover you. I just don't want to go there. I'd rather have it by council resolution and then your coverage is in place. There's quite a bit about staff relations. I think the very simple thing is if you have a question about explanation of policy, that's between you guys. But if you want, you know, if I can help, I can help. But I'm a layperson trying to interpret what your will is, and I can do that. But hopefully, questions of policy are between you guys. If I get a question from the public, yes, I would probably have to answer that, but I answer it right out of the book. In other words, this is what council's policy says. You can't ask a staff person to do something specifically. Like, for instance, I've seen it where a counselor is not here. I said, hey, would you take the dump truck up to Joe's place because he needs some help moving some stuff? That's a no-go. General rule that I've got is if you're asking a staff person for where is something, a document, they can tell you. If you're asking them a specific, you know, when's the next meeting, that sort of thing, or I'm going to say very light questions, I have no issues with that. It's when you're giving direction on an issue that takes them away from their daily work. That's a problem for me because you pay me to direct their work, but it's also a problem that you're putting yourself ahead of all the rest of council and getting information. And if you've got an information request that requires work, you bring it to council for a resolution, then everybody knows what's happening and there's no second guessing and there's no blindsiding. So sometimes when you ask for something, you may, and I'm not sure it's happened since I've been here, this time, where you see something on the agenda, it's there because someone's asked me the question and I want to bring it to you guys so you know what's happening. And again, everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody knows what's happening. Okay. Well, is there anything confidential information? I have to get into that. You know that Section 90 dictates what's confidential, and you do know or should know that there are serious consequences if you disclose items out of in camera. If something ends up with a financial loss to the village, you could be held accountable for that loss. So, and you also could be chucked out of office for the remainder of your term. So there are consequences for disclosing confidential information. So we just don't do that. There's a reason why there's in camera there. And what I've said here is there are repercussions. I have to go to the next booklet, but you may have noticed on page 38 and 39 of the next booklet, which is Forging the Path to Responsible Conduct, produced by UBCM. They actually give a really good section on the types of sanctions that are used in other jurisdictions. And they can include you're taken off of committees, you could be openly censured, public censure. You can read it. There's a whole bunch of different things. Yeah, I'll leave that.
When that happens, if you don't mind me jumping in, when you're censored, you also would end any political. It would likely end any political aspirations, because that will always stick with you throughout.
It could very well. I mean, if it was really serious, I mean, it's public, and then the public gets to decide the next election. But if it's serious enough, it may deter your ability to get reelected. Absolutely. Anyway, that page 38 and 39 is what they deal with sanctions and current practice for sanctions. And I think it's something I've been asked about in the past. And I thought that those two pages were really quite good. It's gonna go a little bit further here. Yeah, okay. So any other questions on that particular document? No? So I'm probably talking too much, right? Forging the path to responsible conduct, very good, UBCM. And again, there's a reason why they produced this, because let's just say a lot of your time, and I mean, when I say you, I mean, as politicians, province-wide, they've run into all sorts of situations where a councillor has misbehaved or a mayor has misbehaved, and that causes you no end of grief. And it turns into a hell of an investment in time and probably resources too, because it does affect staff too, right? Because we're sort of sitting back watching this happen. Anyway, it's good reading, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot more at the UBCM on it. So in the binder, I'm on for a bylaw to provide for council remuneration. I only have one comment there that'll be amended. Just to ensure or to underline to you, it's not the responsibility to complete the forms and find invoices. If you have a travel claim, it's up to you to complete it and to attach all the appropriate invoices. And if the invoices aren't attached and just the numbers there, you won't get paid. Okay, we'll let you know, but you won't get paid without the invoices. Okay, and that's just basic internal control.
Yeah, because we've also run into that with the SRD. And there's been a director that's had to pay back X amount of dollars because it wasn't within the parameters of the bylaw or proof of what they were actually doing.
Lisa, I'm sorry, I'm on to the next one, which is a procedure bylaw. Do you want to say something about that? I mean, my basic comment is, you should be aware of what's in there because that's how you run your business. It basically highlights it's required by the Local Government Act that we have one, and lays it all out. But one question I will ask, I tried to find a section dealing with Robert's Rules. Is that in there as I don't mean a substitute, but where it's not covered in the Procedure Act, do we go by Robert's Rules?
Robert's rules should be listed in the procedure bylaw.
I couldn't find it. It's not that I did an exhaustive study, but I started doing it and then I kind of went on to something else, but I looked for it and I couldn't find it.
That should also be in the procedure bylaw.
Anyway, we'll look at that. Generally speaking, that's the way it goes. You got it?
There it is.
Okay, there you go. What is it, section 3?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't find it and I got onto other things. So section 3, in cases not provided for under this bylaw, the new Robert's Rules of Order, edition 3, applicable to the circumstances and not inconsistent with the provisions of this bylaw and committee charter. Okay, so you know you've got, if it's not covered there, covered there. And you've got a few of the Robert's Rules, and then you've also got some how to handle main motions, but I think a lot of you are pretty good at doing that stuff. If you get it,
What is the current
Your microphone, please.
issue?
What is the current issue of Robert's Rules? Edition.
Yeah.
The last one, yeah.
Last one that you had.
it does say in here, new Robert's Rules of Order, 11th edition, 2011. I would think there's a newer one than that. Sorry, I would think that there's a newer one than that. Is that something I wish to check?
Please.
Maybe we could order some booklets because everybody wants to read Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, if you can't sleep at night. 11th, yes.
That's what you got.
There's probably a new one, but we'll look for it. This one is-
I'm on for the next one, which is a guide for municipal council members and regional directors in British Columbia, 2018. I believe it's been updated. I just haven't been able to find it yet. It was when I did this original thing, it hadn't been finalized. This is a freebie given by Stuart McDonald, and Stuart, I think it's quite good. You should be aware of ultraviaries and things like that. Everybody knows what ultraviaries is, producing a legal decision that's outside of your scope of authority, it automatically, well, it's challenged with, what's the word? Void, yes, thank you, void the decision you've made. I'm on page 3 of it. The most obvious consequence is that a resolution or bylaw enacted without lawful authority is likely to be found void. There can be also personal ramifications for elected officials if council members authorize spending of municipal funds without authority, for example. They can be held personally liable for that expenditure. That's why you have bylaws and decisions, right? So it's all on the public record and it's included in the bylaw. The only defense referred to in the statute is if an elected official relied upon the information provided by a municipal officer who was himself or herself guilty of dishonesty and gross negligence or malicious or willful misconduct, conduct that is rare, and it is rare. Now, I will say that staff have got a get out of jail free card. It's called Section 739 of the Local Government Act. We have a resolution that staff provides you that says you can't do X. That's our get out of jail free card. In other words, you're on your own. I tell you, I don't think I've ever seen it used, but it stops councils in their track because it tells you your staff are not behind you in making a decision that they think is legal. Very, very, very rare, but it has been used. What constitutes a meeting? Because I know that it's kind of interesting because often you hear that can't we just meet to discuss it? On page 10, they talk about 2 instances where the court held in one that basically a gathering was a meeting. Although it was outside of a formal meeting. And how would you know this? Which ordinarily form the basis of a council's business were dealt with in such a way as to move the material along the way in the overall spectrum of a council decision. Okay, so in other words, if you have discussed it and said, well, okay, well, option A looks like the good option, you've moved it material along the way, and that's a meeting. You shouldn't do that. If, however, the case allows for some level of informal discussion by members of an elected body in some circumstances without the gathering reaching the critical mass necessary to constitute a meeting. The question is, what point does that critical mass happen? I'm like, I get it that sometimes you have to sit down and have a chat about things, but then you got to worry about whether or not it's a meeting. So I'll throw this out. This is discussions for you. I mean, my comment is, if it's a matter of clarification of facts, I don't think that reaches critical mass, but I think you have to be careful. In other words, you're talking about the meat and taters of decision, like you got to look at this report and that report and that report just to get the historical background of it. You're discussing that. Not coming to a decision or not moving in any direction, I'd have less issue with that. Whether or not this will ever come up, it is probably not going to come up. Because decisions are usually made here. But I've been to several local governments where this particular issue of whether or not a meeting is a meeting has occurred, and has occurred here. Generally speaking, you simply have the meeting, be it a special or a regular council meeting in camera, whatever. And that way you're safe. What are the consequences of it? If you move it along, it could void the decision. Right? If you have a meeting that's not a meeting and someone sues you for it, it could void council's decision. And it depends on what that decision is and how serious it is. Duty to respect confidentiality. If you're caught giving out confidential information, in-camera information, you could be fined. You could be held liable for the losses incurred by the municipality for disclosing that information. And you could also be kicked out of office and not be able to be there for the remainder of your term. One other little one, you understand direct, pecuniary, and indirect conflict of interest. Pecuniary is anything where you have financial interest in the decision. Indirect would be maybe you have a family member that can benefit from that. I guess it's the receiver of the information. Joe Blow sat in a decision and made that decision with the rest of council, knowing that his cousin was going to gain financially from it. You should consider it. It's up to you to declare it. The mayor was right earlier on when he mentioned that it's up to you to declare it. I have seen where council as a whole has voted to ask for a legal opinion, whether or not Joe Blow has got a conflict. I've seen that. But hopefully once, the best thing to do is if you think you have one, you probably do. And then secondly, to either discuss it with me or the mayor, and we can certainly get legal for you on your particular issue. There are certain things that you don't accrue conflict of interest, and I'm just saying the obviously the one is relates to your remuneration. That's specifically allowed within the act, that you're allowed to discuss your remuneration, although you directly benefit from it. It's considered part of your duties and responsibilities. Where the interest is so remote or insignificant that cannot be reasonably regarded as likely to influence the member in relation to the matter. Where the interest arises from a local service area, the interest of the elected official is deemed to be in common with the other electors. So if you're voting on an issue that's within your area that you're going to get reduced rates, you have a common interest amongst all electors in that service. So that avoids the conflict. Where the pecuniary interest of the elected official is a pecuniary interest held in common with other electors of the municipality. According to case law, this doesn't mean all electors in this family, but a sizable class of them. That's also is an exemption. But there's one other one that raises itself from time to time, and that's what happens if you, as a councillor, are appointed to a society such as Sayward Futures or to the Harbor Board or whatever. If a financial issue comes up that comes from those organizations to here, are you in a conflict of interest? No, you're not. It's prescribed by regulation that in that situation, as long as you're appointed by council, you do not have a conflict of interest. Now, you might want to start picking away at that and say, well, if Joe through the Sayward whatever got himself a big contract and then comes to council for funding, you know, there's always an if, but you may want to look at that. But if you're appointed to Sayward Futures, then anything coming from Sayward Futures, even though you're part of that organization, generally you're covered. You don't have a conflict of interest. Okay. There's a few other ones in there too that, again, it's really good reading. Good disqualification sections. You want to read about that? I think that's all I'm going to talk about there. There's the most interesting part that I find about it is because it's from a legal firm, they bring up the cases too. And the case law is, well, it's a little bit dry, but you know, at least you get this is what actually happened and this is what they did with it. And that's I always find that's interesting. Okay, so LGMA elected officials orientation resource book. I'm not going to get in. I don't think I made any notes for that one. So again, you can have a look at that. Again, that's just suggestions on learning, and they offer a lot of resources in here. And I think there's also courses and webinars you can take.
I thought I turned it off. I'm sorry. It's because it's a new phone.
There's also one here about excellence in local government organizations supporting vibrant communities in British Columbia. This was something new put in here. I think it's kind of interesting reading, and it gives you, I think, more of a snapshot of BC generally and the organizations in BC, but a little bit about BCA in here. Anyway, have a look at it. It's just general information, not holy smokes. On to BC Elected Officials Guide, RCMP, because it may not be a big issue here so much, but in larger municipalities, funding the RCMP is huge because what is it? What's the threshold?
5,000.
5,000, right? 5,000 and then you're paying 70% of policing costs and it goes up from there. So it can make a hell, you don't have to worry about that for a while, but it can make a hell of a difference on your budget. I know that when I was at SCRD, this was a major item. It took several years of negotiations, but I'd like to think that they made some good amendments that included regional districts mainly getting fine revenues that were used to reduce certain tax rates. And the policing tax rate is one of them. So at least we got some of that money back. If they're taxing your citizens by way of fines, you're getting some of that back to offset the overall tax rate on policing services. All right. So what else is in here? You got a little bit about the Vancouver Island Regional Board and their budget, library board, sorry. You've got our their budget information. You've got our strategic priorities in here. I'm not gonna get into that because I think we've already dealt with a lot of that when we dealt with the SPIT report. You've also got the financial statements from 2021, and you've got the budget as well. So I think you're coming up on the budget, so I mean, you'll get a much more in-depth view of how that's put together at that point. So I think just being aware of what it looks like will come as a surprise, and it's pretty good. It's you know, you've got the well, looking at 2022, you've got the old year plus 5 years going forward. So you get a sense of where that budget has been. I will say that I think this is going to be a real challenge this year. I think that it's kind of a watershed year for water and sewer. I think you're going to have to look at getting some more resources there. You've already identified getting a backup for Tony and Mike as a priority, and I think that it's safe to say that they do need more resources just to do the work at hand. I do know that part of that puzzle will be managing the overtime and holidays of the individuals that work in that department. Not making any complaints. They work the hours that are necessary to do the job. But when you understand that overtime is more expensive than regular time, and if they're working overtime, maybe that's best used by having another person on staff. We're going to try and have a report for you on the 17th that basically highlights what those dollar amounts are. And I personally think that getting rid of the overtime will bring us about, I'm going to guess here, 20% of what's needed to fund the new position. And I'm thinking a new position at $60,000 a year. We just have to find the other 40.
I thought it would be more than 20.
But the
Really?
overtime?
Yeah.
I don't know what the number
We'll
is.
find
but-
out on the 17th.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only that, it's the holiday payouts as well.
Mhm.
Because when they get holiday and overtime paid out, that means that that's addition to the budget. So we'll have those numbers for the last 2 years for you. And then also there's just going to be some other things that we look at as well. But personally, I think that the water and sewer rates have to go up a fair amount, and certainly for the log sort, I think that we have to recognize they're using more water than what we've got estimated in the system, and they should be encouraged to move to other sources of water. Using our treated water just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so any questions?
Anybody? No? Okay. If you decide after that you have questions, then feel free to email or call direct. So the council received, discuss, and provide comments on the necessary, as necessary on the orientation binder presentation. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
Second that.
discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Bylaws? None. New business? None. Public question period? None. Anybody online? Nope. Nope. Okay, in camera. That in accordance with the section 92 of the community charter, this council meeting will be held and closed to the public at this time in order the council may give consideration to the matters in accordance with the following sections of the community charter. Section 90-1C, section 90-1 60 K. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. We are adjourned.